Marcus Mariota has a new home. He is headed to Atlanta to be the Falcons quarterback, or at least that's probably the plan. I expect that to be the case. So, what are his chances of succeeding there with the new team and his old offensive coordinator, Arthur Smith? And Dana Altman talked about how there needs to be some cultural changes within the Oregon basketball program from this year to next year. And I agree. And we'll discuss that today on Locked On Ducks. Here we go.
You are Locked On Ducks, your daily podcast on the Oregon Ducks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, it is that time once again for Locked On Ducks. I'm your host, Spencer McLaughlin, D1 play-by-play broadcaster and lifelong Oregon Ducks fan. Thank you for making this your first listen every day, or if you're watching on YouTube, thank you for making this your first watch of the day. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your number one source to stay up to date with the Ducks every single weekday. That's how often that we've got shows dropping here at Locked On. That's the way that we roll. Like and subscribe to the channel if you're watching or wherever you are listening to the show on podcasts right now. 5-star reviews, nice comments, likes on the videos. All of that helps with the show tremendously. I've seen all that stuff happening. If you've ever done that, thank you very much. This episode of Locked On Ducks is brought to you by Stat Hero. Stat Hero is reshaping the way you play fantasy sports. Dozens of house-based games to play daily. No sharks, no funky props, just your skill versus the lineups you choose. Sign up today at stathero.com/lockedon. That's Stat Hero, not Guitar Hero. Fun game. Fun game. Played that a pretty good amount when I was a kid, which I look like to many of you, I imagine, watching on YouTube. But alas, I'm not, somehow, some way. Though I feel like it sometimes when I talk about sports. Anyway, quick note before I get into Mariota. DJ Johnson got engaged to his girlfriend. Congrats, DJ Johnson, who's in his fifth year with the Oregon football program, has changed positions for the fifth time and will be wearing his fifth different number, which is pretty fantastic. So I hope the ring he gave his girlfriend, now fiance, has 5 diamonds on it because, or I don't know if that's a thing that you could do. Maybe you could. I don't know. Not an expert in that category. And all I'm going to say is the last time an Oregon player got engaged was Travis Dye before the Alamo Bowl. I know Oregon didn't win the Alamo Bowl, but maybe it's a good omen because Travis Dye in that game went for 181 total yards and a touchdown. I'm just saying. I'm just throwing it out there because you never know. Here's what we do know. Marcus Mariota is going to get another chance in the NFL. It was reported earlier today as I record this on, what day is it? Monday? Yeah, Monday night. This is dropping on Tuesday. He's going to the Falcons on a 2-year deal. And there's a couple points that I want to hit on that because it's an interesting move, not one that I saw coming, but this was also, after they traded Matt Ryan, they were looking for a starting quarterback, and the quarterbacks they had in the room were not going to cut it for a young coach who needs to prove to his front office that he can win games. Arthur Smith, former OC in Tennessee with the Titans. And that's the first thing that I thought stood out. Mariota going back with Arthur Smith, who was on staff as the offensive coordinator. And I wasn't the head coach, so he wasn't necessarily making the call. But Smith was on staff as the OC calling plays when Mariota got benched for Ryan Tannehill in his 5th year with the Titans. That was 2019. So what that shows me is that Arthur Smith, even though he saw Mariota struggle and Tannehill take the job away from him, that he still has faith, not face. Mario does have a face, of course, but that he still has faith in Mariota's ability to be a starting quarterback in the NFL, because it's not a small thing as a head coach. I mean, first of all, getting rid of the Matt Ryan contract is such a great move for the Falcons. That thing is just way too much money for a guy who's a little bit older. Mariota will be much, much cheaper. And I don't know if you'll be able to get all the production Matt Ryan had, but you could get a pretty good chunk of it, and your ROI dollar for dollar could be a lot better if Mariota is able to stay healthy and thrive the way that we as Duck fans know he's capable of. But you put faith in a guy who was benched while you were the OC as a first-time head coach. That's not an insignificant thing. That's a great deal of trust and confidence that he can be a quarterback who, probably isn't the long-term plan, right? It's a 2-year deal, so Mariota will have to prove it. He will constantly be in prove that you are the starting quarterback mode, which is totally fair. That's where he should be. But Arthur Smith has to prove that he can win games. If you don't win enough games and you don't turn things around quickly enough, even if you don't get your franchise quarterback right away, you might not last. It's the way it goes in the NFL. It's a cutthroat league. And so Arthur Smith has some faith that Mariota can be that sort of guy. And, I liked Arthur Smith as an offensive coordinator in Tennessee. He, unlike his predecessors before him, was able to figure out that Derrick Henry could be a really good, unstoppable force as a running back who should be the focal point of the offense. The guys before him, yeah, they couldn't figure that out. How? Don't ask me. I don't know why, but that's the way it was. And so I think he's pretty good as an offensive coordinator. A lot of the concepts they run, I think, fit well with Mariota's skill set. He knows how to run play action. He'll want to move the pocket, right? That's something he did with Tannehill a decent amount. Mariota will be able to do that. The legs are still definitely there. And, though I liked him as an OC, Arthur Smith as a head coach, too soon to tell, right? It's too soon. It's his first job as a head coach. This will be his second season, and he'll be on his second quarterback. So I don't think that we can really make a determination there yet. They weren't a disaster last year. I mean, they weren't very good, but they were the Falcons. Their roster was not very good. They were a 7-10 football team, and that's about what they should have been, right? If you have a respectable head coach. So he's not a dumpster fire as a head coach. And that's good, because some of the guys who, I talked about in the last episode when I was discussing Mariota, I think it was 2 or 3 episodes ago, if you want to go back and listen or watch wherever you're consuming the show right now, then those head coaches were out of the league. They remain out of the league. They aren't coming back. Mike Mularkey and Ken Wisenhunt and all the offensive coordinators who were position coaches or not coaches anywhere anymore. It was not a great run of coaches, and I think Arthur Smith is at least solid. So that's good for Mariota. What about the weapons and the team around him? We'll get to that after I tell you about Stat Hero. I love March Madness. It's not happening today as I record this, and I miss it already. I love those brackets, but I can't remember the last time I actually went deep or even won any money. I'm hedging my bets this year with Stat Hero's NCAA Pick'em contests. Stat Hero's NCAA single game Pick'ems pits the star players against each other in an amazing hybrid between fantasy and sports gambling. That is like peanut butter and jelly. Great combo right there. Start focusing on the players you know best with a gameplay that doesn't rely on big spreads, long odds, or funky props. They simply post sets of players for you to take on with a set of players that you choose. You are in control. It's a simple, sleek gameplay that will have you playing in minutes. This is what daily fantasy was meant to be. Check out Stat Hero today at stathero.com/lockedon. So the rest of the Falcons team, let's look at the weapons, because that's the first thing that you have to think of now in the modern day NFL especially, is what weapons is he going to be dealing with? Will he have guys throw the ball to? Because in that last episode I talked about, for those of you that missed it, there was this 3.5-minute highlight reel going around on YouTube with Mariota throwing touchdowns on the Titans, and I couldn't name the guys who were there. I mean, it was just the most random dudes. There was a backup tight end in there, a bunch of wide receivers who I don't think are even in the league anymore. It wasn't great. So let's get to the weapons. And the Falcons have got some decent ones, right? They've got Calvin Ridley. Oh, never mind. They've got Kyle Pitts. That's going to be the number one target for Mariota. They need to add another wide receiver, right? Ridley suspended for the year for gambling on the NFL. Cordero Patterson is a really nice piece. And by the way, if you play fantasy football, Cordero Patterson is tremendously valuable. He'll get some carries. He'll line up as a wide receiver. He'll give it to him on jet sweeps, end arounds. You can throw him the ball, hand it to him. He's a really versatile guy that I would want to have in any offense, regardless of the scheme. And they clearly knew how to use him a season ago, because he statistically was a monster all over the place. I'm sure he won people fantasy championships with the way that he produced, caught balls, and also he just had a lot of touches. So hopefully he's going to be able to stay healthy, because he's a really nice utility piece. But now with Ridley down, and even if Calvin Ridley had been there, you have Kyle Pitts, who is just as physically gifted of a football player as I've ever seen coming out of college. When he came out of Florida, I've never seen him drop a ball. He makes ridiculous catches. I love that Kyle Pitts is there. Great red zone target for Mariota as well. But they need to go find a number one receiver, whether that's in free agency via trade or maybe in the draft. College drafts have been putting out, just an unreal number of talented receivers in the last few years. Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson, even T. Higgins at Clemson. I'm not even naming all the guys. You know that. I'm just not thinking of them right now. But they've got the number 9 overall pick. So that's something where they should definitely be looking at. There's a number of talented wide receivers, a couple from Ohio State, Garrett Wilson, Chris Olave. They're pretty darn good. I would really like for them to get Chris Olave. I'm impressed with what I see from him, and Duck fans know him well from the game back at Ohio State. He made a lot of plays in that one. He's a really good wide receiver. He's long. He's got great speed, good hands as well. He's a little thin, but so's Devontae Smith, and that guy's really good. So hopefully they're able to address that, because that's definitely a need on this Falcons team. And speaking of the Falcons team itself, it's not a great roster, right? As you know, on last episode I talked about Mariota. I said the Colts was the best option. That's where Matt Ryan ended up going, and that's a good fit for Matt Ryan, and I think that's a good acquisition for the Colts. For Mariota, the Colts would have been in a better situation, better O-line, better weapons, and a better overall team. Plus, he would have been with DeForest Buckner, which would have been really, really fun. But nevertheless, the Falcons, you're looking at a team that went 7-10 a season ago in the NFC South, which is not that great of a division, not that terrible, right? Tom Brady's still there, and hey, how about that? Mariota will get 2 chances at least this year, hopefully next year as well, to take out Tom Brady. That would be fun. That would be really, really, really good. Herbert almost did that, and then Anthony Lynn's Chargers did what that team always did, blew the big lead. But, this is a Falcons team, bottom 3rd defense in the league last year. PFF had them graded as the number 27 offensive line. So that might be where they need to go in the draft. I think you can probably find receivers easier in the later rounds than you can really good offensive linemen. So I actually hope they look there with the number 1 overall pick, and then in the later rounds, just continue to try and get him some weapons, try and get him some support. And, it's not a great defense either. They need a lot, right? So my expectations for him and the team writ large are not particularly high. I do expect him to be the starter. That shouldn't be a problem unless he has regressed dramatically. I can't see it happening. The other quarterbacks in the room are Josh Rosen, don't need to say more, and Felipe Franks. Half of you don't know who that is. So he played quarterback at Florida. I'm going to take a wild swing here and say Mariota will be the starter for the Falcons. And that's what I've talked about before. He can be a stopgap guy. He deserves that opportunity. The way Trubisky got a chance in Pittsburgh and will probably be the starter there. Mariota deserves that. Now he gets to show what he can do. It's not a great situation in terms of the team around him, but when I think about expectations for the season, I say they were 7-10 a season ago. The team will see what they do in the draft. Maybe they get a lot better. They have some rookies who pop, but if they win 6 or more games and Mariota's throwing for, around 250 per contest and has a decent touchdown interception ratio, I think that'll make the Falcons look at their team and say, okay, quarterback is not the problem here. We can go with Mariota again, win some more games, until we find our franchise guy who comes along. And maybe they want him in the next draft, which will be deeper at the quarterback position than this year's class is going to be, or at least that's the expectation. So if they can win 6 or more games, I think that'll be a pretty good benchmark for him to hit, because it's really not a good team, but they don't have a brutal division. Carolina's sort of a mess. They might be moving on from Matt Rule soon. The Saints are good. They actually brought Jameis Winston back. How about that? 2 games a year. I just thought of that as I was recording this. We get Mariota and Jameis in the same division. Oh, that'll be fun. That is must-see TV for Duck fans. I mean, that's really, really exceptional stuff. So 2 chances at Brady this year and 2 chances at famous Jameis. How about that? I guess there are worse places he could have gone from an entertainment perspective, but there are better ones he could have gone from an overall team perspective. So excited to see what he's going to be able to do there with his old OC, Arthur Smith, now his head coach. Switching over to basketball, Dane Altman talked about how there were some cultural issues throughout the course of this season. That's why this team didn't live up to the preseason expectations. So what sort of players should they be looking for? I'll tell you after I tell you about Bet Online, and it's that time of year where March Madness is finally upon us, grand and glorious that it is. From all the latest odds, contests, and player props, betonline.net is the number 1 source for all your sports betting needs and info. So though Oregon is not in the tournament this year, you, Duck fans, can still get involved by going to Bet Online. And it's not just basketball. They've got your continued source. They are your continued source for all your sports wagering information and needs, live betting, favorite Vegas casino games. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends in action. Bet Online, where the game starts. So Dana Altman had a very interesting press conference that I talked about on yesterday's show, and honestly, I've been thinking about it most of the day and just how, kind of blunt he was with saying, "Look, guys weren't in the gym as much as they needed to be, and I never had to ask guys to come to the gym in my 42 years of coaching, and I didn't have to pull anybody out of the gym this year." And that's telling, and I love that sort of honesty from Dana Altman. I wish you could. I mean, you can't expect coaches to tell you everything all the time, but when they let you in, right, when the door creaks open just like that, and you can see what's going on in the room and hear, you should pay attention because it doesn't happen very often, right? They tend to keep things very tight to the chest, and some coaches will be very blunt, very honest, but most will keep things kind of even keeled, or they don't want to let the genie out of the bottle, so to speak, and make everyone go crazy, send them into a frenzy or anything like that. But after those comments, I am even more interested to see what sorts of players he brings in for next season, not just as recruits, the sorts of guys that they're already bringing in, but also via the transfer portal. He expects guys to be able to transfer, or he expects them to transfer. Obviously, they are able to, and he's very open, honest about, look, that's their right. They need to do what's best for them, and I want guys who are all in on Oregon. If they feel like they can be better somewhere else, more power to him. And I like that approach. I don't think you should cling to a guy who doesn't really want to be there, who's not all in. And that was one of the quotes that I talked about yesterday. I want guys who are all in on being a part of our program. I do too. I imagine you as a Duck fan do as well. And that's the sort of player you want in your program for any sport at any level. You want them to be all in, have their attention and then focus in the here and now. So when we talk about recruiting, it's easy to get caught up in the stars and the ratings, and there's a reason for that, right? Kayvon Thibodeau, number 1 overall recruit, 3 years at Oregon, high impact player. It translates. There's a reason we talk about that stuff. But when you look at it in basketball, which is a much more individual sport than football, that's why I prefer the NFL or college football to the NBA. I love college basketball, though, because I like college basketball more than the NBA, just personally, though I've been a fan of the NBA my whole life. But the difference between the NFL and the NBA is how stars are treated. Stars have more power in the NBA than they do in the NFL. It's just sort of a basketball thing. There's not as many guys on the court, and one guy can impact the game in basketball way more than he can in football. Individual players can have an impact in football. It's not even close to the same level they can in basketball. If you have Kevin Durant on your team, he could go out, score a third of your team's points, and you win the game. Tom Brady has to have 5 guys who block for him every time he drops back to pass, or else he's toast and he's not going to be able to do literally anything, right? Football, the ultimate team sport. I think even more so than soccer. I know some people, I don't know if any of you watching are in Europe or big soccer fans perhaps, but football more so, you need more guys in order to score than you do in soccer, right? In soccer, you could have 2 or 3 guys make a brilliant run up the pitch and finish it off. In football, you have to have at least 7 or 8 guys on any given play doing their jobs at a high level. So when you're talking about basketball, the personalities of guys matter way more than they do in football. Not that we should ignore them there, but it's much more influential because there aren't as many guys on the court. You're representing 20% of your team on the floor at any given time. So when you talk about, the 5-star recruits, and on a future pod, I'll talk about the recruits that Dana has coming in, and Kellel Ware is one of them. Johnson is another guy. I forgot his first name, but that'll be a subject for another day. They're really highly rated players, and Dana Altman has done that time and time again. We've seen him bring in 5-star players like Bol, like Troy Brown, like Lewis King, like N'Faly Dante, who was a 5-star recruit. Just keep this in mind, right? I'm going to go through a few players here, as we're in March Madness talking about college basketball, who are high-level college basketball players, but were not big-time recruits, and there's a reason for it. So Colin Gillespie on Villanova, one of my favorite players in the country. There's nothing flashy about his game, not a single thing. He is just a solid player through and through. It's your classic Jay Wright, Villanova basketball player. Fundamentally sound, makes the right play. He's skilled, got good size. He's one of the best guards in the country. He's a 3-star recruit. 3. Count them. 1, 2, 3. Leaving 2 stars on the table for those of us that count at home and like to do math. College basketball, first and foremost, is about guard play. And Colin Gillespie is one of the best in the country. He was a 3-star guy. And yes, in football, 3-star guys can pop as well. But in basketball, from a cultural perspective, I'm interested to see how Dana goes forward because of how the recent 5-stars on the hardwood have gone for the Ducks. They really haven't gone all that well. Dante is a good player. I like him a lot. Hope he comes back. Hasn't been healthy the whole time. Lewis King never looked like a 5-star player on the court. Troy Brown was good, but was never great, was a little bit unrefined. He was one and done. Bull hardly saw the floor, got injured. It's just when you have all this hype around these guys in basketball, it seems like it doesn't pan out as often in football. A 5-star recruit in football, those guys rarely miss. They're rarely below average players. It does not happen as often as, in basketball. The guy who comes to mind for me going back a few years, Shabazz Muhammad, went to UCLA, big-time 5-star recruit, high draft pick by the Minnesota Timberwolves. He didn't really do anything in the league. He was just kind of a guy. I don't think he's even in the NBA anymore. He might be on a G League or on some roster on a 10-day contract somewhere. I don't know. But those sorts of guys don't pan out at the same rate that they do in football. Another guy, keeping it with the Ducks, Payton Pritchard, a 4-star recruit. Now, he was a pretty highly rated 4-star, but remember when he got to Oregon on that Final Four team? I mean, he was the baby on the roster. He wasn't going one-on-one. He wasn't, he was just kind of a ball handler, hold your own, don't make mistakes, knock down a 3 every now and then, maybe a nice looking drive, every game or two. And he got better as the year went on, but he didn't come in with a bunch of hype and have to be the guy right away. He developed, he grew within the program. And Dana Altman knew he was getting that sort of player, and he absolutely did. And Payton Pritchard developed into an NBA caliber player. And he is now a really solid backup point guard for the Boston Celtics, who are a legitimate team in the Eastern Conference. He is the epitome of what you want in a college basketball player. A guy who's talented, a guy who wants to work hard, but does not have the one and done potential to where he's just going to be here and say, like, this is kind of a formality and I'm just kind of do this. No. That's not what you want in college basketball. It's not what wins. It's what gets a lot of attention. Your team will win games, but look at the teams that win national championships. They've got high-level guard play, most oftentimes veteran guards. Jalen Suggs and Gonzaga a year ago, little bit of an exception. But Gonzaga, on that note, look at their great players the last few years. Rui Hachimura, 3-star recruit. Drew Timme, balling right now in the tournament for the Zags, a 4-star recruit. Also has been in the program for several years. Both of those guys were. They've had a bunch of, that's what Gonzaga does better than anybody else. They bring in guys who don't play a lot their first year, don't expect to, and then they develop them. They are masters up there in Spokane at player development. And yes, in the last few years, Gonzaga has gotten the Jalen Suggs, the Chet Holmgrens of the world, who are really highly rated prospects and are one and done. But those guys are not the foundation of what has made Gonzaga basketball great. They are not. They supplement the core guys like a Drew Timme or a Rui Hachimura, a Philip Petrusev, a Josh Perkins, or Nemhard, the guard they got from Florida last year. He's stayed there for a couple seasons. Those are the guys who have built Gonzaga into the program that it is. Villanova is another great example. I love Villanova. I absolutely love watching them play. They're so fundamental. They're so sound. They never have one and done guys. Josh Hart was a 4-star recruit. Eric Paschal was a 3-star recruit. Chris Jenkins, who hit the game winner in the national championship game, 4-star recruit, but they were all staying multiple years. They weren't one and done sort of guys. And can that work? Yeah, it can. But Duke hasn't won a national championship since 2015. And in one class, they brought in the top 3 recruits in the same class. Cam Reddish, RJ Barrett, and Zion Williamson. They didn't get to the Final Four. They got to the Elite 8 because they were very talented, but it's different. You want guys who are going to come to your program, grow within it, both as basketball players and as teammates for one another to build that sort of chemistry that you need. Who did Duke lose to? Michigan State. Who did that Sparty team have? Cassius Winston. Been at Michigan State for a few years, had been at the time, grew under Tom Izzo into a really good player, veteran guard play, wins at a high level in March. It has been proven time and time again And yes, Duke gets a lot of attention. They still win a lot of games, getting guys like Paolo Banchero, but they don't win as many national championships as you might think they could. Kentucky, another great example of this, because you have so much change, so much turnover year after year. So Dana Altman, after seeing this season and how it went with the transfers and how it's just thinking how it's gone in the last few years with all these big name 5-star recruits, I'm going to be really, really interested to see what sort of guys he brings in and whether or not he's going to be able to keep them around, because that's what you want to see in college basketball. That's what wins consistently. Virginia had a bunch of veteran guards. They played a Texas Tech team that had some veteran guards. They also had a Jarrett Culver. You shouldn't, go away from the big name recruits altogether, but the guys who build your program are guys like Payton Pritchard and Will Richardson, who are there for 3 or 4 years, play at a high level, and develop as players to become stalwarts in your program season after season. I appreciate everyone listening. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and go Ducks.